Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Jackie Betts. I'm the city administrator. Thank you for joining us tonight to hold our annual severely rent burden public meeting. This is a meeting that the state requires for communities that are classified as severely rent burden. Tonight, we have our consultant, John Southgate, that is going to talk to you a little bit about what severely rent burden means and some of the ways that Gladstone's been addressing their affordable housing choices in the past year. So I will hand it over to you, John.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Betts, Chair Melch, and members of the commission. I'd like to start by providing a brief overview of state legislation. You got it? Thank you, Ms. Betts and Chair Melch and member of the commission. We're here tonight because of state legislation, HB 4006 from, I believe it's 2019, which requires that any city that is severely rent burden is required to hold a hearing to talk about the challenges of affordable housing and possible options for resolution of those challenges. A severely rent burdened city is a city where more than 25% of their renting households pay more than 50% of their gross income on their housing costs, which is a challenge indeed. And I'm sorry to say that Gladstone actually is the most severely rent burdened city in the Portland metropolitan area. And the last time I checked, it's the second most challenged in the state of Oregon. I hope that in not too many years future, we will no longer have to hold one of these hearings because we're able to address the challenges of affordable housing in Gladstone. So what I'd like to do, I know we've had these conversations in the past. I'll provide a brief overview of what the city's doing as required by the state legislation to address this challenge, and then highlight a project that speaks to the city of Gladstone's commitment to help resolve the challenge. Maybe I'll stop there and ask Chair Milch if there's any introductory questions before I start to launch. Great. I know you're quite familiar with initiatives that the city has taken in the past, I'll say 4 or 5 years, to address the need for more housing choice, especially for people at the lower end of the economic spectrum. Those include, in chronological order, the Downtown Revitalization Plan, which was adopted in 2017 by City Council, which, amongst other things, calls for higher density, I call it medium density, housing in our downtown core along Portland Avenue, sort of south of where we're sitting right now, in new mixed-use development. The 2019 Housing Code Audit, the State Department of Land Conservation and Development, DLCD, helped fund a study of the housing code to look at what are some code changes we could undertake to address the housing challenge. The housing needs assessment, which was adopted by City Council early this year, I think it's January, maybe February of 2021, which identified the need for either more acreage within the city, which would be a challenge since we're basically landlocked, or looking at fixes to our zoning code. So that aligned with the housing code audit from 2019. And then HB 2001, adopted in 2019, aligned with the city's housing code audit, called for more housing choice in our zoning code. I feel like I'm just throwing a lot of numbers and details at you. The essence of it is this: the city, aligned with state and metro regional policy, has recognized the need to create more housing choice and has therefore initiated changes to the zoning code and the comprehensive plan policy to achieve that challenge. You'll hear in a few minutes tonight the first presentation from a consultant team, MIG, which will be talking about fixes to that zoning code and the comprehensive plan as per HB 2001, as per the housing code audit, as per the downtown revitalization plan, just in a few minutes. In the meanwhile, Jackie and I spoke a couple of weeks ago about what we should talk about at this required hearing. And we thought we would profile a project, the Webster Road project. And if I may, I'll shift gears to that. Let me stop again. Are there thoughts or questions about the effort and why we're here tonight for this hearing? Yes, sir. Chair Milch.
John, back when we had our first meeting, required meeting of this type back in December of 2018, we did sort of a poll among those present to try to figure out what people thought were the reasons that we had the severe rent burden in our community. A lot has changed since then, including the pandemic, which changed a lot of people's priorities for the type of housing they wanted to live in. And that had a big impact on market value of homes in suburban communities. People that at one time liked apartments in urban areas decided they wanted a big backyard and plenty of rooms where they could have Zoom meetings and at-home schooling and all the rest that was part of that. Have we had an update on the figures, the percentages of people who are rent burdened in our community since 2018, or how often do we get those figures from whatever sources provide them?
That's a great question. The data that I'm working off is from 2019, which is to say it does not reflect the 2020 census. I will report back to you to see if we have more current information. My sense is that, especially with the housing needs analysis done earlier this year, is that if anything, we're facing a greater challenge in terms of affordable housing. I could be wrong, but my information is a couple years old, and I will confirm if there's been changes in those trends.
Thank you. I think the fact that we've had 2 or 3 of these things just almost concurrently going on gives us a lot of support for the idea, your impression, and I think I share it, that the situation continues to be one where we have not worked ourselves out of this by any means yet, and we continue to need to address it. Thank you.
Yeah. Another question.
I had a similar question with the data that I've got on this. I'm assuming what you're talking about, the numbers. And I was under the impression originally that Gladstone was one of the biggest concerns about it having a small community that was really rent burden. But when I look at these numbers, there's 8 or 10 groups that have a higher percentage than we've got. And they've got a lot more people in them. And so it doesn't look to me as it's really a huge problem. It's a problem, it's a concern. But I'm not sure it's more of a concern than many other cities. And I would assume with all these cities involved, which some of them are much bigger than Gladstone, there must be some information in the middle of that to how people are dealing with it in other cities. Like with Corvallis at 41% compared to our 34%.
Yeah.
And or Eugene, which is 39%.
College towns may create an anomaly. the report I read today is that we're at 37% of our renters are paying more than 50% of their gross income in rent. So we may be talking about different years, different apples and oranges. So let me confirm data, hopefully from the 2020 census, so current, and convey that to Ms. Betts so she can share that with you all. I will say too, one of the challenges that we face statewide and really in the nation is construction costs continue to escalate. I know I'm stating the obvious. Challenges with supply chain. I hear that the cost of lumber, the cost of everything is really skyrocketing. So if anything, the challenge is greater. Wherever we sit on that scale, every city in Oregon, it's a deeper problem. I'm working in a number of cities, some on the coast, some in the region, and producing affordable housing for workforce is, every community I know of is struggling with that challenge.
Mr. Southgate, I believe Commissioner Poole has a question for you.
Great.
Yeah, I'm looking at this in kind of a bigger picture, and Tom, appreciate Commissioner, I call him Tom, but Commissioner Merceau's comments, because we're in a regional problem. We're in a situation where there's only so much we can do, and frankly, folks, downtown redevelopment, while there may be room somewhere for a subsidized or an affordable complex, redevelopment downtown is going to create more density, more property value, create some good things, and I'm not opposed to it. But I guess my question is, if people are still rent burdened, Gladstone doesn't have a lot of say-so over what's really going on out of Salem and elsewhere, and even from Metro. So I think we really need a concise conversation beyond this evening. That's for sure. And I know we're here about a certain thing, but the issue we're talking about transcends everything else. And I think we all know that. Affordability, no matter what we do, the cost of living is and housing is going up. And I'm not trying to be Mr. Negative or throw rocks at this, but we have to be realistic about, well, what is it can we do? And how do we get to doing things a little quicker in terms of just acknowledging that no matter what those numbers say, we have a tremendous problem and it's not going to get better soon. I almost don't want to hear the numbers. I can drive down every street in every town and tell you what the numbers are. So again, I'm not trying to be cynical, but this is a real biggie and we're caught in the middle of it. This is no umbrage towards anything anyone said this evening. Thank you.
My initial response to that is certainly to agree. We're in a much larger context. We're in a region of over 2.5 million people. And so we're a small portion of that. And the fact is that Gladstone's, the cost of housing in Gladstone, certainly for a single family house here, is very competitive. It's probably one of the most affordable places to buy a house in the region. And so there's going to continue to be a lot of pressure on the market here. I'm a believer in economics. If you create more supply to meet the demand, that brings down the price, and I think that's probably our great challenge. Echo Northwest, the consulting firm in Portland, said that the gap between what we really need and what we have is going to be in the hundreds of thousands by the year 2030. And to fill that gap is going to take a heroic effort. And I don't think we're going to completely achieve it. I think the things that we're talking about later tonight, as we and other cities take those measures will fill some of that gap, but it's going to be a challenge. I think it's a national challenge, and it's certainly a statewide challenge.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. It's just a big one.
And I want to piggyback on that too. I think the fact that it is regional and statewide, and that we have statewide legislation, which is helping to address it, means that we're not trying to deal with this issue in Gladstone in a vacuum by ourselves. If all the communities in the region are trying to add additional options for housing at the same time, and we can all manage to achieve that, and we'll get the report from MIG to see where we are on that right now, then that's different from us either not being involved at all and seeing greater options for housing in other communities and people moving away, or if we, with the constraints that we have of trying to add more housing to a, as we've described it, landlocked community, we'll hope that some of that housing will be, just by virtue of size, be more affordable to families who are willing to live in a smaller starter home of some kind at a lower price point. So I'm looking forward to the report from our consultants on the code audit, because I think that is one element that we're trying to do here and that other communities in the region are doing too, to address this
Right.
as a regional and statewide issue, not to mention other communities across the country that are doing essentially the same thing.
Right. So
My original question and considerations were that there's a lot of people on this list. And there's a lot of good ideas. I believe that each community is going to be different and have a different perspective of where they come from. But is there an option, or is there some way that we can gain by this other knowledge that's out there and ideas? Everybody's attacking it different, but maybe there's some really good ideas out there that we could take in consideration.
Well, I think that's a great question to pose to the folks from MIG, the planning firm that is working on new code. They have worked with these issues around the state, I think around both Oregon and Washington. So I would hold your fire, pose that question. What are things that other cities are doing that Gladstone might do to help address this challenge?
Thank you.
So with that, I'll pivot. You all should have a copy of this document, which I believe is or will be online as well for folks who can't be here in person. This is a 2-page document that summarizes the project at 18000 Webster Road. This is a sort of project that is part of the solution. In saying that, I realize it's a massive problem. And so one project at a time is only a drop in the bucket, but hopefully there'll be more of these. This is a former nursing home facility on Webster Road, obviously, built in 1967. It's been vacant for several years. It is now going through a major rehabilitation to create 48 affordable units affordable to senior individuals. If the age of 50 qualifies as senior, I'm not sure, but I will definitely be eligible to live there. I am. However, they also have to earn no more than 30% of median family income, which is about $20,000 a year. The 48 units will be a mix of studios, single room occupancy units, and efficiency units. They'll include obviously a sleeping area, a private bathroom in each unit, as well as, depending on the unit, some level of food prep. So one could live there independently and not have to go to the common kitchen area, but there will also be a common dining facility and community space. The project cost is $19.4 million. And it illustrates the complexity of these projects. It has a variety of funding sources. Metro bond dollars. You may recall voters in Oregon, in the Portland region approved the bond in 2019, I believe. And this is actually the first Metro bond funded project in Clackamas County. So we should be proud of that. It also includes 4% low-income housing tax credits authorized by the state, includes home funds, which are a federal allocation that comes through the county. And then there's also some state of Oregon permanently supportive funding. The pricing in these units will be such that actually the real issue is individuals or couples who rent in this project will not have to pay any more than 30% of their income. If you make zero, you pay zero. If you make 10,000, it's 3,000 a year. Utilities are covered by the ownership. I think you probably all know this. Construction started last summer. This body actually approved the conditional use permit in May of 2020. Completion next summer. These projects are complicated and they're not cheap. There are a bunch of state and federal requirements that come with the funding. Sort of careful what you ask for, but it's going to provide 48 units for people who are at risk of either at risk of homelessness or are currently homeless. The county has a list of people who are seeking this housing. So this is, I shouldn't call it a drop in a bucket. 48 units matter a lot to those 48 households, but it's the first step, I'd say, in Gladstone helping to meet the need of those who are desperate for safe, decent, quality housing. Happy to answer questions. The staff from the Housing Authority of Clackamas County couldn't be here tonight. She had another hearing, so I'm sort of her replacement, but happy to answer any questions I can. And if you have questions that I can't answer, we'll certainly get those from the county. Yes, sir, Mr. Smith.
I'm not so sure I'm asking a question as much as raising an issue. Is Gladstone is, in my mind, kind of hamstrung with our ADU size limit of 400 square feet. And I know we've talked about it in this body a number of times. And I just wondered if we're anywhere near getting the ball rolling to changing that at all. And it's not that 400 square feet is uninhabitable, but it's small in comparison to what our communities in the region are doing. And I think,
yeah, early in the work with MIG, actually with Joy's assistance, we identified a number of other zoning code provisions that bear on housing. And so they are going to be tackling that. Again, I would ask them that, but I believe that that is something that they're going to address in their work over the next few months. That's a great question.
And just to close the loop on Commissioner Merceau's question regarding what are other cities doing in the state. So the League of Oregon Cities just today released a report, and it's how cities are tackling housing shortages through local innovation. It highlights Medford, LeGrand, Hood River, Tualatin, Madras, and Forest Grove. And I'm happy to make a copy of this and send it to the Planning Commission, because I do think there's value in cities, even though we have different land use policies, geographic constraints. It is important to see how other cities are handling the housing shortage innovation. So I'm happy to share that with you.
Thank you.
thank you, John. One other thing I noticed, you mentioned that there are certain requirements about funding and costs associated with a project like this. I thought I saw Commissioner Pat Smith pulling out his phone to use as a calculator, because if you divide 19.4 million by 48 units, it's over $400,000 per unit. And some might question, well, why don't we buy, 48 houses at $400,000 that are already out there on the market? But I'm sure the answer is much more complex than that as far as, and you wouldn't get the kind of services, of course, that we're doing here.
Yeah, although I have to admit, when I read that number and I did the math this afternoon, and that's a lot of money. I'm on a committee for Metro that looks at transit-oriented development. I'm sorry. And these projects typically are required to meet sustainability requirements, to be LEED rated. There's an expectation of design quality. So they have to build them to the highest standards. I wish I had a simple answer. Well, here's why, but it's a lot of money. In terms of innovation, I would love for this state to work with developers, both for-profit and nonprofit, to ask the question, what do we do to bring down these costs? I hope that we're in an anomaly right now with the supply chain and with the labor cost, but my developer friends, I don't think they're terribly optimistic that, okay, this is a blip and in a year or two, we're going to see it come and stabilize. I think we're at a new plateau, and for it to significantly, noticeably decline, I wish I could say otherwise, but I'm not terribly optimistic that'll happen.
But the one thing that I think we all need to realize, this is really a supply and demand issue. And the supply right now is way down in most cities. And the demand is quite high. And that's why, the medium-sized home a few years ago used to be 150,000, 200,000. Now it's triple that.
Yeah, that's the problem in a nutshell. Yeah.
If I may, I know we're considering obviously these code changes, and a conversation came up a while ago, and I'm when we look at where people live, I wonder again if we're looking at mixed use along 99. There seems like there could be great opportunities there for one, supply quality housing for folks who need it, and it's a place where I think developers could look to have units, residential units, and commercial space where the transportation lines are there already. Parking, there's a lot of parking lots there too. That's something that the more I look at it, the more it seems to make sense to really consider code changes on that corridor. And I'm not sure if there are certain rules that maybe make that hard to do, but I think that's something that we should seriously consider as a way to provide many units to really increase our supply of housing.
I'll just make the observation. I think that's a very astute observation. That McLoughlin Boulevard, I don't even know, Joy probably knows what the zoning allows there, if it allows housing by right, and if so, on what density. But if you developed it at even a moderate density, you probably have capacity for thousands of units. I think one of the challenges, though, is McLoughlin is not terribly conducive to a walkable, pleasant to live area. And I've done, as Ms. Betts knows, I've done a fair amount of consulting work with Clackamas County over the last several years, including the Park Avenue Station planning area. And I think there's a great opportunity there, but I think the public sector would have to make policy and physical investments to make it more conducive to attract a developer to develop there.
Is that in some way happening? It's my understanding that the county is improving, or would it be ODOT is making improvements to 99 for both pedestrian safety and some beautification. Am I incorrect with that?
My honest impression is they're making baby steps, but I think it would take a larger effort to really change the dynamic to make it appealing to developers.
I was just gonna point out that 19.4 is a little bit shocking. Sorry. But you know, as John mentioned, there are typically in these type of projects, they do have standards they have to meet, Energy Star, Energy Star rated appliances, and then Earth Advantage and things like that, different type of windows that just perform better. So that does increase costs, you know, and then looking at the 19.4, just not knowing what that contract could be, it could be, you know, not to exceed, you know, and then there's shared savings for the owner. So there's a lot of different things about how that project could be set up that we're not privy to. But yeah, that's just, I wanted to point that out. Oh, and also I'm sure they're working on bully wages. So labor is not cheap at the moment. So yeah, so that's gonna increase costs for you.
And if I could, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I showed-
we have a notice of a public hearing at 6:30, so we need to close out the severely rent burden part of this.
Just to the question, according to 2020 figures, we are right behind Gresham is the second most severely rent burdened city in the Portland metropolitan area. I didn't look closely at other cities outside the metropolitan area. But thank you. And I think the next presentation of the hearing will start to speak to some of the questions we've been discussing.
Thank you, and I'm stopping the recording now.